It began with the scent of brewing coffee and the low hum of distant car wheels. Just another ordinary morning until bright red and blue flashes shattered the calm rhythm of our usually quiet street. I was mid-sip on my second cup when I spotted her. Karen Martinez, the reigning president of our HOA, was marching across my front yard like she possessed every inch of it. She held her phone high as if it were some official authority, her sharp voice cutting clean through the early silence as she spoke into it, loudly reporting what she described as a hazardous hoarding problem at my home. I stood in my doorway, arms crossed, watching the spectacle play out like a neighborhood drama I never signed up for. Curtains in nearby houses shifted open, blinds tilted. Curious eyes peeked out, lured by the commotion she had stirred up. Karen's face glowed with smug self-assurance, certain her carefully crafted performance was about to reach its grand finale. But when two police cruisers rolled into my driveway, and one of the officers stepped out, I caught the exact second her bravado cracked. The taller officer went to her first, notepad ready, asking for details about the emergency she claimed needed immediate attention. She launched at once into a wave of inflated accusations. Just 3 months earlier, I had lost my 17-year-old son, Michael, in a car crash. The grief hadn't dulled not even slightly. It struck in unpredictable moments, sharp enough to steal my breath. His room was exactly as he had left it the morning he swung his backpack over his shoulder and headed to school for what became the last time. His baseball trophies still stood proudly on their shelves. His favorite book still rested on the nightstand. His clothes still hung neatly inside his closet. Keeping it all untouched gave me a painful comfort, a small thread connecting me to the boy I would never get back. Karen Martinez had only been part of our community for 2 years. Yet in that short span, she had maneuvered her way into influence HOA president, event planner at St. Matthews, and self-appointed guardian of neighborhood standards. Just last week, she appeared at my door wearing a polished, overly practiced smile, manicured nails gleaming, holding donation forms and empty boxes. With syrup-laced sympathy, she expressed her condolences. Then she moved right into her pitch, a charity drive for underprivileged kids. Donating Michael's things, she suggested, could honor his memory and help others. I declined as gently as I could. I wasn't ready. For a moment, her smile wavered before she forced it back into place. She nodded dramatically, but then casually mentioned that leaving a deceased child's room untouched wasn't healthy. She followed it with an insinuation about community expectations, property values, the need for progress, and whether or not I agreed with it. Over the next days, her forced concern curdled into pressure. More empty boxes appeared on my porch, notes tucked into my mailbox. At first, they were framed as polite reminders about the charity event. Soon, though, they turned into sharp accusations claiming hoarding was selfish, that other kids needed these items, that I wasn't doing my part as a community member. Karen began gathering the HOA board. Rumors spread quickly. She painted me as an unstable shut-in, swallowed by grief, someone damaging the image of the neighborhood. At hastily held HOA discussions, she pushed stories about my supposed mental decline and the danger of letting my situation go on. Neighbors approached me cautiously, many with apologetic looks. Janet Thompson came by one evening and admitted that Karen had been asking questions about my daily habits, whether my home was clean, and if my yard was maintained. Janet wasn't hostile, just bewildered. Karen had made it sound like I was living in filth, a fragile emotional disaster waiting to happen. She even gently suggested that giving away a few items could demonstrate goodwill, maybe smooth things over. I told her, grief isn't something you sweep aside to satisfy community opinions. She meant well, but her words left me feeling even more isolated. Karen's campaign had worked disturbingly well. Neighbors who once offered quiet sympathy now began siding with her, some fully aware, others pulled in without realizing it. And then came Friday. That morning, Karen showed up again, but this time she didn't come alone. 5 volunteers from her church followed behind her, all dressed in identical St. Matthews t-shirts, carrying more cardboard boxes, and wearing soft, pity-filled smiles. She announced they were there to help pack up Michael's things to relieve me of the burden, she said. It felt like some twisted intervention pulled straight from a cult script. The volunteers honestly believed they were doing something kind. An older woman gently touched my arm and told me how giving away her late husband's clothes had brought her comfort. Another quoted scripture softly. Karen hung back, arms crossed tightly, observing them deliver their rehearsed lines with the satisfaction of someone conducting a well-planned performance. But I recognized exactly what this was, a tactic. She had portrayed me as a grieving father slipping into delusion, someone the community needed to rescue for its own good. I planted myself firmly at my front door. "You are not entering my house," I said. "I've already told you no." Karen's FOD cracked instantly. Her voice sharpened. She threw around words like Christian duty, moral cleanliness, and community safety. When I still refused to let them in, she took the next step. Right there on my porch, she dialed 911. Loudly, dramatically, she reported filthy hoarding conditions, claimed fire hazards, and questioned my mental stability. As she spoke, I noticed the volunteers' faces shift to knees, confusion. This was not what she'd told them when she enlisted their help. The elderly woman stepped back. Two younger volunteers whispered anxiously to each other. Karen saw their hesitation and raised her voice even more, adding a flood of wild claims: pests, structural damage, dangerous living conditions, anything she could say to justify police involvement. When Sergeant Thompson and Officer Rivera arrived, they didn't walk into a chaotic disaster zone. They stepped into a quiet home, tidy, orderly, heavy with grief, but far from hazardous. As they questioned Karen, her narrative fell apart. She couldn't point to one concrete danger, just broad gestures toward my house and vague concerns about unused items. I explained everything calmly and clearly about Michael, the charity boxes, the pressure, the harassment. Sergeant Thompson pulled Karen aside, face hardening. Officer Rivera took notes and reassured me that what I'd been subjected to bordered on harassment. When the officers informed Karen that filing a false police report was a criminal offense, all the color drained from her face. Hearing the phrase "misuse of emergency services" struck her instantly. The officers explained that her call matched the legal criteria for a false report, and that she would be cited. Karen's boldness vanished the moment Officer Rivera clicked handcuffs around her wrists. Audible gasps broke out from neighbors who had gathered outside. Phones appeared. People recorded. Karen's face burned red as she was escorted to the patrol car, lenses catching every second of her humiliation. By late afternoon, the whole subdivision knew. St. Matthew's Church released a statement distancing itself completely from her actions, emphasizing that her behavior did not represent their values. The HOA board immediately scheduled an emergency meeting and suspended her indefinitely for misconduct and legal liability. A month later, Karen stood before a judge. She received 30 days in jail, $1,500 in fines, and 100 hours of community service. The courtroom was filled. Neighbors, church members, even some of the volunteers who had accompanied her that Friday sat in silence, stunned or ashamed. After the hearing, a few of them approached me. They apologized sincerely. They admitted they had been manipulated, that they finally understood what she'd done. Karen's attorney begged for leniency, arguing that she'd had good intentions. But the prosecutor laid out everything: notes, meeting minutes, recordings, witness statements. The judge wasn't convinced. He was especially concerned about the improper use of emergency services. He called it a dangerous abuse of trust. When Karen was taken into custody, her eyes darted around wildly. It was the same rattled, disbelieving look she'd worn when the officers first arrested her. She had spent months believing she was untouchable, the moral guide of the neighborhood. But now she was simply another person discovering that cruelty disguised as virtue carries consequences. And I, still grieving, still healing, finally felt a measure of peace. Not because she faced punishment, but because I was free to honor my son's memory in my own way, no longer trapped beneath her judgment. If this story touched you, or if you believe no one deserves to be bullied in their own home, hit that like button. Subscribe for more powerful real-life stories that reveal the truth behind deceptive facades. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if your neighbor turned into a nightmare in the name of community standards?